Well, happy Sunday, guys. I'm so glad that you are here. If we do not know each other, my name is Emma. I work here on our middle school team. I'm so excited that I get to wrap up our series called Focus. Somebody say focus. Are you focused? No, love it. Thanks for the honesty. Well, get focused if you're not focused, all right? You can get focused partly by grabbing a Bible. So go ahead and grab a Bible, open it up to Matthew chapter 6. That's where we're going to hang out. And I'm super excited because this morning we get to talk about a little bit of a weird topic, okay? Or it's weird for some of us. It's the topic of fasting, okay? Fasting. Can I take a little poll while you're turning to Matthew 6? Who has heard of fasting before? Great. Who's never heard of fasting before? Okay, we've heard of it and not heard of it. That's all right. Well, most of us, I think, have heard of it. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think when we hear the word fasting, a lot of us have this weird reaction to it. We're kind of like, okay, fasting, yep, heard of it. It's not eating, right? I don't know about it. It's kind of like hardcore, only hardcore Christians do that. And maybe that's just me, but that's exactly what I thought when I was growing up. I grew up in the church, and we never really talked a lot about fasting, and I really thought that. I just thought, that's just weird Christian people stuff. They're just doing too much. We don't need to do all that. Following Jesus is not about what we do. I just don't need to be doing fasting like that. And as I've gotten older, my perspective on fasting has changed. I've really started to see the value of doing it, and I want to share those thoughts and kind of what the Lord has shown me with you guys this morning, and I want to do that by way of this passage in Matthew chapter 6. So let's just dive right into it. This is Jesus speaking. This is the Sermon on the Mount. We talked about prayer last week, and we're going to pick right up where Jesus left off talking about prayer in verse 16. He says, "And when you fast, do not look gloomy like the hypocrites, for they disfigure their faces that their fasting may be seen by others. Truly I say to you, they have received their reward. But when you fast, anoint your head and wash your face, that your fasting may not be seen by others, but by your Father who is in secret. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you." There's a lot to unpack here about fasting. I just want to start off simply with what is fasting. You guys said that you've heard of it before, but I want to give us a definition for our time this morning of what fasting is, okay? Simply, fasting is just not eating food for a set period of time. I think we have a slide for this definition. Fasting is simply not eating food for a set period of time, okay? It is literally just going a little bit longer between meals to eat another meal, okay? It's just spending some more time being hungry intentionally. Fasting is not new, certainly. In prehistoric times, hunter and gatherer societies, they just were naturally fasting, right? Because they couldn't go down the street to McDonald's or Publix, right? They just spent some more time in between meals than we do. In the Old Testament, we see fasting a lot. Moses was the first person in Scripture to fast. We see Daniel fast. We see the prophets fast. We see Esther fast. And in the New Testament, we see Jesus fast. He fasts in Matthew chapter 4. And it's also not an old thing only. It is still a current thing. Practicing Catholics right now are doing something called Lent, where a lot of them are fasting. Practicing Muslims fast during Ramadan. People who are Hindu or Buddhist also fast for some things. Orthodox Jews fast for festivals. So this is not simply Christian, and it's also not old. This is modern to us. But what Jesus knows, and I think what we can agree, is that not everybody fasts for the same reasons, right? In Matthew 6, the people that Jesus is talking to are very familiar with fasting. Okay, they've done it. They probably have weekly rhythms of fasting. And so Jesus' teaching on fasting is not only about, he's not really concerned if we're doing it. He's talking more about the why and the how. Okay, and so this is what Jesus is spending his time talking about in this passage. And so, why do Christians fast? Why do followers of Jesus fast? What are the right reasons that we fast? Well, the most basic reason that Christians fast is because Jesus fasted, right? Following Jesus is not just following a set of rules. It's not following a set of rules. It's following a person. And as followers of Jesus, we do the things that we do because they were modeled first by Jesus, okay? So simply, we fast because Jesus fasted. Further, Jesus assumes that his followers are going to fast. Look at what he says in verse 16, the way he talks about fasting. He says, when you fast. He doesn't say if you fast, okay? He's not commanding fasting, but he is assuming that those people who are serious about following Jesus are going to fast, okay? He is not interested so much in if we do or not. He's saying, listen, when you do it, I want you to make sure you're doing it for the right reasons. Let's keep reading what he says so we can kind of double click into what he's saying here. He says, when you fast, don't look gloomy like the hypocrites, for they disfigure their faces and their fasting so that their fasting is seen by other people. They have their reward. They have what they're looking for, but I want you to fast in a different way. I want you to fast so when people see you, they don't see your suffering. Only I see that you're fasting, and I, in secret, will reward you. What I want you to see here is how we fast exposes why we fast. Okay, look at the Pharisees, look at the hypocrites. How were they fasting? They wanted you to see them suffer. They walk around like this. Oh, I'm so sad. I'm hungry. I'm fasting. I'm so holy. Please see me. Please see how hungry and how much I'm suffering. Jesus says that's a little dramatic, okay? They have their reward. We see why they're fasting through how they are fasting, right? We see exactly what they want to accomplish, which is that other people see their holiness, right? It's kind of like when you're watching basketball, and you know how people like try to draw a foul, and they get injured like a little bit, but then they make a big display about it. I have a couple videos that I think are kind of funny. Here's LeBron. He gets elbowed, which, that probably hurt, but like, come on, you're fine. Okay, look at this guy. Flops, bro. Flops. And you're watching it and you're like, okay, that's a little dramatic. But what do they want? They want you to be like, look, I got hurt. Please, give me, foul them. Please, I want this reward from my flop, right? And Jesus is saying this is what the hypocrites are doing when they are really dramatic about how they fast. They're saying, look at me, look at my suffering. But Jesus says for us, get out the expensive serum. Break out the oil. Get the sneakers out. Get the fit that you've been saving for a special occasion so that when people see you, they see the joy that you have from obedience to Jesus. The reward is not in what other people see. So what is the reward in? What is our reward for fasting? Well, I want to quickly talk a little bit about what happens in our physical bodies when we fast, okay? So your body, when you eat food, your body burns something called glucose, okay? This is the primary energy source of our bodies. When you're eating a lot of food, when you're eating enough calories, when you're eating in an excess of calories, your body just only burns glucose. But when you eat in a calorie deficit, or if you fast, your body will burn off all of the glucose and it will shift. It does something called metabolic switching, and it will shift to burning fat. Okay, and when your body burns fat, it produces these chemicals called ketones. And ketones are really good for your brain. They're really good for your body. Science has shown us that fasting or eating in a calorie deficit has good effects on our body. It's good for muscular health. It's good for cardiovascular health. It's good for your brain. People fasting say that they have less brain fog, that they have more memory, that they have a higher performance of memory. Okay, and this is why people will do things like intermittent fasting. Y'all heard of intermittent fasting? Right, so it's not just a religious thing, and it's because people want the reward of fasting. Now, why do I tell you all of this? I tell you this because I want you to see that it's almost like we have a God in heaven who knows our bodies and who told us something to do with our bodies, and it actually has benefits for us. Weird, right? So this is one of the rewards of fasting. This is a physical reward. It's secret. No one can see this, what happens in our bodies when we fast. But this is not the only kind of reward we get from God when we fast. There is a spiritual reward when we fast as well. This language that Jesus uses, hey, don't pray in public, don't fast in public. I want you to only be seen by me in secret. This language that we just read probably sounds familiar. And the reason it sounds familiar is because last week we read Jesus saying the exact same thing about prayer. He says, hey, don't pray on the street corner. I want you to pray in a space where only your Father in secret sees. And part of the reason I think he says this is because fasting and prayer are very similar concepts. Think about when you pray. Think about how you may bow your head, close your eyes, and fold your hands, right? Is this because this is a miraculous posture and this is like the magical thing that we need to do so God can hear us? No. What it does is it positions our bodies so that our minds are more focused on God. And fasting is the same exact way. When we fast, when we say no to food for a period of time, we are positioning our bodies so that our minds are focused on God. Now, how does this happen practically? What do you mean? When we say no to food, my mind is more attentive to God. What's the connection there? Okay, well, let's talk about it practically, okay? On a normal day, you go about your life, you're not fasting. You feel hungry, what do? You eat food, right? That's a basic instinct that your body has. You just say, I'm hungry, I'm gonna eat. And that's not bad, okay? Let me tell you, fasting is not about how food is bad, okay? The teaching is not that food is bad. The Bible talks about fasting about 30 times, and it has references to food and feasting hundreds of times, okay? Fasting is not about how hunger or food is bad. But let's just go with this logically, okay? Say that you decide to fast. You feel hungry. What do? You don't eat, right? And your hunger serves as like this reminder that, you know what, right now in this moment when I feel hungry, I'm gonna choose to pray. I'm gonna do something else with my body and my mind. Instead of focusing my attention on satisfying myself, I'm going to choose to turn to Jesus, knowing that He is the person, the only one who can truly satisfy me. Fasting is a way that we posture our bodies so that our hearts and our minds are focused on God. I think this is important for us because one of the things I think a lot of us do, I'm guilty of this all the time, is that we compartmentalize our lives with God. We compartmentalize our spiritual lives, right? So many of us think that our lives with Jesus is only in the heart. It's only in our minds. We never will do anything with our bodies, and we don't think about how our bodies impact our time with Jesus. But can I tell you, you are not just a brain. You are not just a heart. You have a body. And if you limit your spiritual lives to only happening behind your eyes, only happening internally, you will miss out on super important and helpful intimacy with Jesus. And God knows this. Jesus knows this. This practice of fasting is a way that we offer all of ourselves, not just our minds and our hearts, to God. I already told you that Jesus fasted in Matthew 4. When he's fasting, he's in the wilderness, and the enemy is there, and he tempts him. He says, hey, if you're the Son of God and you have all this power, I want you to take these stones and turn them into bread. And look at what Jesus says in response. He says, man does not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of God. Jesus knew that, yes, he could satisfy his own hunger. He could do it in much less dramatic ways than turning stones into bread, right? He could just go find some bread and feel satisfied. But he said, no. Through fasting, I'm choosing to say no to something that I can easily satisfy myself with so that I can say yes and I can focus myself and my body and my person and offer my whole self to God, who has way more for me than simply what some bread can do for me. If you hear nothing else this morning, I want you to hear this. You do not just depend on Jesus with your mind and your heart. We depend on Jesus with our bodies, with our whole selves, not just with our minds and our hearts. I told you that I wasn't sure about fasting when I was younger, and then as I got older, I was kind of curious about it, and so I started practicing it. I just said, okay, I'm going to pick a day of the week, and I'm going to decide to do it, and so I picked Tuesdays, and I decided I was going to fast from dinner time Monday night to dinner time Tuesday night, and if you know anything about me, you probably heard me talking about P.F. Chang's. Okay, I did my time working at P.F. Chang's. I worked there for about 3 years, and it just so happened that in the season that I was fasting in, I worked every Tuesday. Okay, so picture me at P.F. Chang's, not just a restaurant surrounded by food, but P.F. Chang's, like good food. And I'm surrounded by food all day, and I'm fasting, right? You can imagine there were a lot of opportunities to depend on God, right? I was like, this is not easy. But I learned a lot in that season, and one of the biggest lessons that I learned was how to depend on God in these tiny moments that I otherwise would have never thought about God. Because like I said, we go about our lives and we just eat, and it's not bad, and so we don't really think much about it, and fasting offered me the opportunity to just pause, to say, you know what, I am hungry, and I'm going to choose, just like Jesus, to depend on Jesus for my strength and satisfaction, not just this very good P.F. Chang's food. But what I also noticed in that season at P.F. Chang's fasting was that fasting is symbolic. As much as it's a physical practice, and it is, this image of me surrounded by food at P.F. Chang's and still saying no was an image of me in the world surrounded by things that are telling me they can satisfy me, and I still say no. Because food isn't the only thing that promises to satisfy us, is it? How often do we sin because we believed a lie that that thing would satisfy us? We were hungry for something and it promised satisfaction, but it could never satisfy. Fasting is a practice of regularly saying, I am saying no to this thing that will satisfy me. It's basic, it's food. It's not bad. But through this practice, I am literally getting my body in the habit of saying no to the things that promise me satisfaction so that I can depend on God, who is the only one who can offer me satisfaction. You have a body, not just a brain, not just a heart, not just a spirit. And just like you have a body, Jesus had a body. And in his body, he took nails, and he took thorns, and he took a sword. He said no to all of the other things the world had to offer so he could say yes to God's will. And God's will was that you and I would get to be reconciled to him so that one day we get to choose. You know what? I'm going to say no to all of these things that the world has to offer that promise to satisfy me, and I get to say yes to Jesus. So let's get practical. You say, okay, you sold me. I'm ready to fast. Let's do it. How do we do it? Let's talk practicals. I have a list. Your small group leader also has this list that she can give you, they can give you. Start small. Okay, start super small. If you're not sure about fasting for a 24-hour period, pick a meal. Just skip lunch or something. I don't know. If you are not sure about skipping a meal, skip a type of food. If you love soda, just don't do soda for Tuesday. I don't know, pick a day, pick a food. There are no rules on this. It's an invitation by Jesus, not a command. So make it easy. Start really small. Schedule it. You are not going to accidentally follow Jesus well, okay? You need to schedule it and be intentional, okay? And be strategic about this. Listen, if pizza is your favorite food and Friday is pizza day, don't fast on Friday. It's okay. Don't make it harder than it needs to be, okay? Fasting's already hard. If you have a big practice or a big game or, a doctor's appointment, maybe don't fast on that day. It's okay. Pick a day strategically to do it. You don't have to do it alone. Invite friends in to do it with you, okay? When Jesus is talking about doing it in secrecy, he's not talking about a shady type of secrecy. He's talking about a holy type of secrecy. The point isn't to keep it fully a secret. The point is to not flaunt your holiness so that other people can see you, okay? So if you're not sure about it, if you need some accountability, invite a friend, invite your mom and dad, invite somebody into it. It is so much fun to do it with our friends when we are struggling. Pray often. Fasting is not just not eating food, okay? That's a start, but you need to do something else in that time, and prayer is the move, okay? When you're praying, you can say something like, God, I choose you instead of all of this other stuff to be my satisfaction. You can repeat his words in Matthew chapter 4, verse 4. Man does not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of God. Delight. Fasting is not about you suffering, okay? It's not about you punishing your body. Fasting is about delight. Jesus said, hey, get out the oil. Hold your head up high. And something that can help you when you're hungry is doing something else that brings you joy, delight. Give to the poor. We don't have a lot of time to dive into this, but in Isaiah chapter 58, God talks a lot about how fasting, true fasting, is aligning yourself with those people who are not choosing to be hungry. Okay, you're choosing to be hungry when you fast, but not everybody's choosing to be hungry. And so maybe give the food that you were going to eat to somebody. Maybe spend the money you were going to spend on food. Give it to somebody that you know is struggling. Consider donating something to a food drive. Don't glorify the means over the end. Okay, the means is not eating food. The end is intimacy with God. Do not make the practice more important than the person the practice is pointing you to, okay? Don't put all these rules and commands on it so that the practice is more important than the person, okay? Don't glorify the means over the end. If you have a health problem, if you have a disordered relationship with food, if you're just not sure about fasting at all, it's okay. Practice another practice of abstinence, okay? Say no to Netflix. Say no to secular music. Pick a day to not do video games or social media. The point is to position your body so that your mind is more attentive to God. And finally, I want you to contemplate your practice. If you're a journaler, I want you to journal about what the Lord has done in your heart in this time. And I want your story to encourage you in the future. It probably will. When you're struggling, our past experiences with God can inspire us, but it can also inspire other people. And so I want you to share that. It's not about this shady type of secrecy. It's about a holy type of secrecy. And your story can encourage and inspire other people. So those are some practicals. This week, your small group leader is going to invite you to fast with them. They're going to say, hey, let's talk. Let's pick a day. Let's do something. Let's do a practice of abstinence. It might not be food, that's okay, or it can be a fast. Get creative, do it together, figure it out. I want to invite you to do it, to take it seriously. It's just an invitation, okay, it's not a command. If you're not sure about it, that's okay. But I invite you to lean in, I invite you to try it. Your small group leader is going to lead the charge. They have this slide for you. They also have some other resources for you if you're curious about fasting that you can get from them. Following Jesus is the most rewarding thing that you can do, and it's way more joyful when we do it together. So I want to invite you to lean in, fast this week, and do it with community, all right? All right, let's pray. Jesus.